From the center of the examination room, Kale watched the heavy reinforced alloy slide shut. 3 consecutive pneumatic thuds sealed the Level 5 biological containment door. Amber warning strobes pulsed above the seal. A standard medical clearance physical did not usually require weapons-grade quarantine protocols. The part that still confuses me? It wasn't the emergency lockdown itself. It was the single drop of blood that triggered it. Beneath his boots, the floor vibrated with the aggressive whir of high-capacity atmospheric scrubbers. The air tasted like bleached copper and sterile ozone. Across the metal table sat Director Mira Thess, her Mirati primary eyes blinking out of sync while she arranged medical instruments with rigid precision. Beside her hovered Inspector General Vorik. His 3-chambered heart fluttered visibly against the thin membrane of his neck. That level of sterility Vorik maintained meticulously. He viewed biology itself as a chaotic, disgusting variable that needed rigid policing. Kale shifted his weight on the cold diagnostic bed. With his right thumb, he absently scratched a slightly red, swollen bump on his left forearm. The skin felt warm, tight over the localized irritation. Beneath that inflamed tissue, an invisible microscopic war raged, millions of neutrophils swarming a foreign neurotoxin, breaking it down with ruthless biological efficiency. He ignored it completely, looking instead at the sterile blue slate floating directly above his knees. Subject NM07, Thess stated, her tone devoid of inflection. We will now commence the 24-hour immunological production assessment. Another blood test? Kale asked, rolling up the sleeve of his gray standard-issue tunic. Those were preliminary toxicological screens. Thess tapped the floating blue slate. This measures systemic defensive output. Before engaging the extraction needle, Thess carefully verified the complex calibration metrics on the main diagnostic console. She spoke strictly to the room's recording node, outlining the strict baseline expectations for the galactic travel permit. For a biological entity of Kale's mass, the standard Vayanthi comparative model required a cellular defense mechanism capable of producing roughly 2 million white blood cells within a standard planetary rotation. Any drop below that specific threshold indicated critical immunodeficiency. A truly robust specimen might push toward 3 million under moderate environmental stress. 2 million, Kale repeated. Got it. So we're just checking if I hit the quota. Precisely. Thess pressed the pneumatic device against the crook of his elbow. A sharp pinch, then a familiar tug of pressure. The device hissed, pulling a microscopic fraction of a milliliter into its sterile internal chamber. The machine clicked twice, digesting the sample. Then it went completely dead. Vorik gripped his own wrists. Equipment failure? Negative, Thess replied, leaning closer to the suddenly dark screen. Processing buffer overload. The diagnostic matrix is struggling to categorize the numerical output. Inside the machine, the processing core whined, a mechanical stutter that sounded distinctly like panic. The blue holographic slate remained blank, processing an equation it was never designed to compute. Kale leaned back against the diagnostic bed with a slow exhale. His heart rate monitor pulsed a steady, rhythmic 72 beats per minute. Not a single tremor. Thess observed his relaxed posture, her secondary eyelids sliding shut in a Mirati expression of clinical pity. Such extreme calm in the face of an overloaded diagnostic scanner meant only one thing to her species: advanced neurological shock. His biological systems must be experiencing a catastrophic simultaneous shutdown, flooding his brain with palliative enzymes to ease the transition into death. Why else would he sit there so peacefully? Why else would a creature facing total organ failure simply ask about a midday meal? He is crashing, Thess whispered to Vorik. The internal defense network has collapsed entirely. The scanner cannot find enough functional cells to register a count. Kale frowned, flexing his arm. I feel fine. The auditory processing centers often generate phantom reassurances during the final stages of systemic decay. Thess recited. Her voice trembled slightly. Whenever genuine fear breached her professional exterior, she defaulted to quoting safety protocols. Section 4, Paragraph 9. Maintain a soothing tone while the subject expires. I'm not expiring, Cale said. Out of his pocket, Cale pulled a battered datapad. He tapped the cracked screen, opening a text-based electronic mail client. His apiary manager had promised to send the weekly honey yields by noon. Above them, the airlock strobes continued their slow, amber rotation. Relentlessly, the air scrubbers roared. Cale scrolled past a message about a broken centrifuge, entirely ignoring the medical scanner's rising, unstable thermal hum. He rubbed the bee sting on his arm again. Just a few hundred stings a season, he muttered to himself, reading a line about protective suit maintenance. Nothing a little ice can't fix. Vorik's vocal synthesizer crackled. Did he say, hundreds of stings? Yes, Cale replied, looking up from the screen. You work with hives long enough, they get you. No big deal. A single sting from an indigenous venomous insect terminates a vaanthe. Vorik stated, his hands visibly shaking. Hundreds would melt the internal skeleton. Good thing I don't have one of those, Cale said. Good thing I don't have one of those, Cale said, scratching the swollen red bump on his forearm one last time before dropping his hand to his lap. Director Thess ignored the exchange entirely, utterly convinced the human's auditory processing centers were simply misfiring in the final throes of death. Through the reinforced transparent partition, she keyed a silent digital command to the automated biorecovery drones waiting in the staging bay. A heavy, lead-lined mortuary capsule descended from the ceiling tracks with a slow, grinding mechanical hum that vibrated through the metallic floorboards. For a dying creature, strict planetary protocol required immediate thermal incineration to prevent the catastrophic spread of whatever opportunistic pathogens had triggered the systemic collapse. She adjusted the cuffs of her protective synthetic gloves, preparing her datapad to document the exact moment of his neurological failure. The mounting thermal heat of the diagnostic scanner, she barely noticed. Inside the machine's central processing core, the analytical buffer finally cleared the numeric overflow. The device groaned under the unprecedented computational strain, a deep, resonant acoustic vibration that shook the metal table and rattled the sterile surgical instruments arranged on the aluminum tray. Cale sighed, tilting his battered datapad to catch the sterile overhead light. With the edge of his cotton sleeve, he buffed a greasy thumb smudge off the cracked glass, tapped the screen to lock the device, and slipped it casually back into his front pocket. Choking on a sudden burst of raw biological data, the primary console shrieked. Above his knees, the floating blue slate flickered rapidly, losing its crisp structural cohesion. The stagnant zero vanished completely. Digits cascaded across the holographic display in a blinding white blur, updating faster than the Mirati optical nerve could comfortably process. 2 million, 5 million, 50 million. The scrolling numbers did not stop. 900 million, 3 billion, 7 billion, 10 billion. Flashed the final, stabilized readout in glaring crimson text. Not a single sound escaped the director's throat. 10,000 million white blood cells, produced, deployed, and completely recycled within a single standard 24-hour cycle. Thess grabbed the cold edge of the metal table, her primary eyes wide and unblinking. Her entire clinical framework shattered in an instant. The relaxed posture, the slow heartbeat, the casual discussion of venomous insect strikes. None of it was the palliative shock of a failing biological system. He was not a fragile entity quietly succumbing to total organ failure. His body was a relentless, microscopic forge, manufacturing a standing army of billions every single day to wage perpetual, invisible war against a hostile universe. The localized red swelling on his forearm was not a fatal breach at all. It was a microscopic mass grave for the invading neurotoxin, a battle he had already won without even realizing he was fighting. 10 billion, Kale leaned forward, squinting at the harsh red text hovering in the air. He shrugged, his shoulders dropping in a loose, casual arc. Sounds about right for a Tuesday. Look, my transport meter is running out in the docking bay. Plus, I skipped breakfast to get here on time. Can I grab a sandwich now? Against the far wall, Inspector General Vorik collapsed heavily into a rigid sanitization chair. For 42 years, the Vayanthi official had maintained absolute, paranoid sterility, breathing only through triple-filtered vapor masks and bathing exclusively in harsh ultraviolet radiation. Now, his three-chambered heart hammered so violently against his narrow ribs that the heavy gold tassels of his ceremonial sash visibly trembled against his chest. The meticulous, obsessive safety of his entire rigid existence felt completely irrelevant in the physical presence of a creature that weaponized its own anatomy at such a catastrophic scale. Lock down the sector, Vorik wheezed, his vocal synthesizer dropping a full, terrified octave as he pointed a trembling digit at the human on the table. Suspend all human travel permits. Isolate the ventilation shafts. Immediately. Kale frowned, looking between the two panicking aliens. Hey, I passed, right? 2 million was the minimum requirement for the visa. You did not pass, Thess said, her voice completely hollow, stripped of all its former bureaucratic authority. She keyed a rapid, frantic command sequence into the primary console, manually overriding the standard medical clearance protocols. The amber warning strobes shifted instantly to a solid, aggressive crimson glare. Heavy durasteel blast shutters slammed down over the transparent partitions, sealing them tightly inside the examination theater. The quarantine seal is no longer meant to protect you from the galactic environment. It is meant to protect the galactic environment from you. The Level 5 containment protocols extended outward like a digital infection. First, the magnetic locks engaged on the immediate corridor, dropping massive titanium bulkheads from the ceiling. Then the administrative wing sealed itself, cutting off all atmospheric exchange. Finally, the entire Sector 7 Xenobiology Institute locked down. Every single external door secured shut with a deafening hydraulic thud. The galactic narrative of human fragility dissolved completely, replaced instantly by the terrifying reality of their endless, violent internal regeneration. The heavy lead-lined mortuary capsule retracted into the ceiling tracks with a metallic scrape. On the metal table, Kale unwrapped a foil package containing a pressed synthetic protein sandwich. He took a large bite, chewing slowly beneath the solid crimson quarantine lights. Floating directly above his knees, the diagnostic slate no longer displayed a calm blue 0. Locked onto the screen burned 4 words: Class 12 biological asset.